all these PG sessions, and I had the opportunity of working with our today's moderator as lecturer Dr. Sumita Karandikar. Madam has completed glaucoma fellowship from Arvind, and also her interests are also in pediatric ophthalmology. So she has 2 super specialties to her credit, and now Madam is working as a professor as well as a unit head at DY Patil Hospital. So welcome, Madam. And Dr. Pooja Deshmukh has done her MS from Mumbai, and now she's working as a senior consultant at HN Reliance Hospital. Pooja, would you like to introduce yourself a bit more for all the people who are attending, and then you can kickstart the session immediately.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. I used to be Swapnesh's junior, and I had the privilege to study under Ma'am Sumita Madam's lecturership back in the day. It is a pleasure that we all here together are, coming together to present a lecture series to you all. I'm currently working at HN Reliance Hospital as an anterior segment consulting surgeon, and since the last 6 years. Before that, I was a assistant professor in IGGMC Nagpur, and shortly I worked as a consultant at CEPI as well. I'm ready when you
tell
me.
Yeah. Sumita Madam, anything you want to add, or we can start?
Yeah, just our journey started with the rigid IOLs with you. And today it's a pleasure that we'll be talking about newer IOLs with both my students.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. The pointer, the cursor is the pointer, right, Swapnesh?
Yes. Or you can right click it. Just right click it. And you can see, you can choose pointer options. You can choose that laser pointer, which is better.
Lovely. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you can start, Pooja, now.
Yeah. Hi, friends. I hope you all have joined. So I'm glad to be holding a lecture for all of you PG students. The scope of today's talk would be something which encompasses a lot of your short and long LAQs and SAQs, as well as peppered with a few concepts, so that few things are clear while we go on and see the practical part of it. Also, I'll be talking in between about the experiences or the practical experiences we have with the latest IOLs, premium IOLs in my practice, which are readily available in India. Of course, starting with the history of the first IOL ever implanted by Sir Harold Ridley back in the 1950s. And the ideal IOL, which would give us, the ideal results, would be the one that we have, the phaco's that we have in our eyes. But the IOL should also mimic the properties, and hence the quest continues, where astigmatism and blurring can be reduced. Halos and glare can go away. PCO and blurring can be taken care of. So we have a clearer image, and all of these problems that we face with IOLs can be taken care of. Also, the last thing is presbyopia or accommodation. And if blurring of near is also taken care of, we'll have our ideal result. That's far from what happens in reality though. Here we see just a basic on what all materials an IOL is made of, and that imparts its certain properties, like surface modification possible only in PMMA and silicon IOLs. Water content of hydrogels are high. Protein deposition, epithelial deposition, WBC is very high in PMMA and silicon IOLs. Dysphotopsias are least in silicon, but more in hydrophilic acrylic. Practical pearls that we can take away from this is just that silicon lenses do form PCO, so do hydrogel. They incite Elschnick's pearls. Gap fittings seen in silicon and PMMA lenses. PCO rates are most in PMMA, silicon and hydrogels, least in acrylic ones. And best for IOL exchange is hydrogels. what we know of is again that, the rounded off edges of which would, posterior edges of the IOL which would touch the posterior bag would cause the lens equatorial cells to form PCO, which is now avoided in the newer square edge design. Coming to concepts. These are very important as we go along this lecture. Concept alert for what are the aberrations that we face when we deal with a less than ideal or the quest for the ideal IOL. Spherical aberration is when a particular surface, where in the normal conventional IOLs, the peripheral surface is more curved than the central ones. Hence, the rays refracted by the peripheral lens are coming to a focus before the central ones. And this forms a defocus area and not a single point of focus. This is taken care of by asphericity. So we veered more towards IOLs who have aspheric properties rather than the spherical older ones. Chromatic aberration, I'll just touch on, is due to the refractive index of the lens material, where the yellow light focuses on the retina, blue on the retina, and red before the retina. All of these aberrations cause problems with our conventional IOLs, and hence we veer towards the premium ones. Some of them are taken care of, some of them still remain, but to a lesser degree. So how does spherical aberration affect the image? Here you can see what it does is a prismatic effect, and here the asphericity provided by the newer IOLs gives us a real life image. Same is that spherical aberration is also affected by the pupil size as well as the effect of decentration, which here you can see is taken care of once we implant the aspheric type of IOL. So what is spherical aberration and negative and positive spherical aberration? So here we see conventional IOLs induce a positive spherical aberration. Ideally, the cornea itself has a plus or positive spherical aberration, and hence the IOL we place inside should either have a negative one to neutralize it and make it zero, or have one which is adding extra negative, and that I'll show you here. The conventional IOL, the central rays are coming to focus beyond this particular place, and hence this produces a positive spherical aberration. Here, the Tecnis IOL is supposed to induce a negative spherical aberration, and it counters the same effect, whereas the Bausch & Lomb aspheric one gets all the points to focus at one. The goal here is to minimize positive asphericity inherent in conventional IOLs and move more towards zero spherical aberration or negative spherical aberration. Let's see here. So the cornea has positive spherical aberration. Standard older type IOLs with spherical aberration give it another additional bolus of positivity with positive spherical aberration that causes a net positivity, and which actually degrades the image a lot. So what does this particular IOL do? Here the cornea has an inherent positive SA. It is nullified by the Tecnis IOL negatively structured spherical aberration, and the net is zero. So it improves the image quality a lot. Most of our lenses that we use in diagnostics are all aspheric in structure. And these are the commonly, routinely used aspheric IOLs. Most of the surfaces now are aspherically structured. And here we see how much of a difference contrast sensitivity, it can occur in contrast sensitivity if we use a spherical IOL as opposed to an aspherical IOL. Coming to more fancy IOLs, I must say that while we go through this section of the lecture, we should keep in mind that they're good for writing short notes or long questions, but are available real practice only in the USFA or Europe currently, and not very readily available here. But as everybody likes fancy concept cars, we look at some fancy IOLs as well. So the blue light violet blocking treatment that is done to a lens, it takes care of the chromatic aberration, and this can reduce the risk of also ARMD. it does have a concern that sleep and circadian patterns may be affected. Based on the principle of the pinhole and the Stiles-Crawford effect, we have a small aperture IOL by Maucher and AcuFocus, which extends the depth of focus. It can be used in post-LASIK, post-RK, and irregular corneal astigmatic patients. The macular magnifying Shariat macular lens actually adds a central plus 10 diopters and gives a magnification of almost about 2 times and helps the patients with AMD see much clearly. Implantable miniaturized telescope, or the IMT lenses. These also help. These are visual prosthetic devices to improve vision in AMD patients. And it's a glass cylinder. An optical device contains wide-angle micro lenses that provides retinal image enlargement. The Omega Gemini capsule is not a lens, but it is a device which holds the lens or a piggyback lens and addresses the issue of effective lens position. It's a 3D device which takes the volume of the complete bag, and here you can place drug delivery device, piggyback lenses, as it has tiny shelves and can be used in post-operative enhancements as well. The light activated lens is a silicon IOL where power can be adjusted after the implantation by 365 nanometer UV light. Protective glasses have to be worn post the surgery, and multifocality can be modified. The surface can be modified, the lens itself can be modified for it to make more multifocal later. RIS femtosecond laser, or the perfect lens system, is not a lens like the LAL is, but it is actually a system which uses femtosecond laser energy to selectively change the refractive index and change the refractive power of an IOL which has already been implanted. It can give toricity and multifocality to the lens later. And here the lens is not from perfect lens system, but it could be your lenses like Johnson & Johnson, Bausch & Lomb, Zeiss or Halcon, and these can be modified. So here, this is a system, whereas this is a silicon lens, and it uses ultraviolet energy, whereas this uses femtosecond laser energy. The rollable lenses fitted in even post 2 mm incisions, post 1.8 mm MICS. And these are solid rod. It's a solid hydrophilic acrylic rod, which when implanted, the body temperature transforms it into a soft gel-like material, which has the shape of a full-size biconvex lens from Thin Optics. Concept alert again. So before we delve into the accommodative IOLs, let's see what pseudo-accommodation is. This is something which all PGs must know. Apparent functional near vision in an emmetropic or distance corrected eye without changing the refractive power of an eye. In pseudophakic pseudo-accommodation, the principle used in the IOLs, which we are going to now see in the next section, is the principle of pseudophakic pseudo-accommodation. Expected here is anterior movement of the IOL due to ciliary muscle contraction, ATR corneal astigmatism, which helps to see near vision clearly, a smaller pupil size to the fertility of the cornea due to its aberrations. Accommodative IOLs are of 2 types, single optic and dual optic. Here we see the single optic right here. Dependent on ciliary muscle contraction, producing an increase in vitreous fluidic pressure, pushing the lens forward, releasing the zonular tension, and this allows the elastic capsular bag to press upon the IOL haptics, which pushes this lens forward and gives the near vision effect based on the increased effective lens power after the forward movement. The accommodative IOL, or the dual optic IOL, here the high powered positive anterior optic and negative posterior optic. In an accommodated state, the capsule holds the lens close to each other. Accommodation releases these zonules, leaving the capsule to compress the haptics, moving the anterior lens forwards. Some examples of these are the Lumina lens or the Aqualens oculentis. This has 2 optical elements. The Synchrony AMO, which has a central blend and off. The anteroposterior movement is said to give certain degree of both near and distant vision. The Dynacurve by new lens changes curvature in response to accommodation by using the collapsed Bags-O'Leary complex as a mobile diaphragm, thus giving accommodation. The Weyerl from Medicem is a hyperbolic posterior optic, gives polyfocality, but of course is riddled with PCO and the problem of IOL tilt. The Juveen is a two-lens model. Here there's a central fluid optic and a monofocal base lens, which changes curvature. The Sapphire IOL is electronically controlled, remotely programmable, utilizes nanotechnology and artificial intelligence. The speed and amplitude of pupillary responses are used to differentiate between light and accommodation. In hibernation mode, it has a fail-safe mechanism to convert to monofocal status till it is recharged. The elliptical accommodator, of course, has 2 elliptical or 3 elliptical, in fact, haptics, which produce almost +4 diopter accommodation. The Tetraflex, which has an anterior vaulted flexible acrylic lens with square edge optic. Flex optic also it conforms to the lens geometry and gives the accommodative effect. The fluid vision, here, it changes accommodative power by increasing and decreasing the quantity of fluid within the optic. The Liqui lens is a dual liquid gravity dependent lens with a single optic containing 2 immiscible liquids of different refractive index. With down gaze, the liquids change position, producing an increased power. Addressing with the newer IOLs the issues of a younger non-cataractous high ametro is the ICL or the implantable columnar lens, which is placed on top of the clear lens that a person has, with a very high myopic number, and that takes care of the refraction even before the patient develops cataract, of course. So in a non-cataractous younger individual. So is the iris fixated phakic IOL. Prelex is a management strategy where older non-cataractous patient responds better to this than LASIK. A clear lens extraction is done and a multifocal implant which produces high ametropic correction in younger, older individuals. Then the concept of piggyback lenses to check to correct high ametropia. Pseudophakic ametropia correcting a remaining refractive error after IOL implantation in the capsular bag. Also tandem correction where spherical and astigmatic refractions procedures can be undertaken on 2 separate occasions. Flex is an example. IOLs that are not very commonly used, though are available. The most commonly used premium IOLs are those based on refractive and diffractive principles. In the refractive multifocal IOLs, which addresses distance, intermediate, near, sometimes only distance and near vision requirements, the refractive ones are based on the principle of curvature-based refraction of light. And here in the refractive ones, light is lost, hence less contrast sensitivity. It is pupil dependent and centration sensitive. Also has more glares and halos. The diffractive ones, the anterior surface does the distance foci function. The posterior surface has steps or a diffractive pattern or zones. The diffractive wave port optics comes into picture here. 41% of light is equally distributed to the near and distance foci. Less light is lost, only about 18%. It is pupil independent, forgiving on decentration, and has lesser photic phenomena. Again, before diving deep into multifocals, we need to know few concepts. A few words will be thrown around when you study or compare multifocals to each other, like apodization, MTF, the defocus curve. Nothing to get worried about. You should just know a little basic about it, that pupil diameter based optical property of the IOL change across the optical surface is apodization. More light is made available to near when the patient's pupil is small, and more to the distance when the pupil is larger. Hence, driving at night in an apodized diffractive IOL, more light will be directed to the distant focus and less to the near focus. Hence, lesser glare and halo. The MTF, RMS, and point split function are all indirect indicators of contrast sensitivity and higher order aberrations. Defocus curves. To check and compare optical performances in various multifocals, you'll come across this terminology. Refractive multifocals based on the property of curvature. The curvature is the one which gives it power to focus at 2 or more points. Here the light is lost, like we saw in the other slide. It is pupil dependent and centration sensitive. The diffractive multifocals play with width of the concentric zones. The concentric rings are across the posterior surface with discrete borders, which creates a diffraction pattern. The anterior of the distance foci, the posterior surface steps take care, or the posterior surface rings and the width of the rings takes care of the near ad. Controlling the width of each zone, 2 focal points are reached, creating 2 precise clear images. The width of the rings gives it the power, and the height of the rings distributes the light equally. These are pupil independent and forgiving to decentration. Here we see how the width of the diffractive steps govern the ads of +4, +3, and +1.7. Again, comparing the optics of how a monofocal works. It gives a single focus for distance. A diffractive would give a near and a far focus, and a refractive would scatter light a lot and also give a near and far focus. These are the commonly used multifocals. Coming to the EDOF, or the extended depth of focus diffractive pattern IOLs. This is a technology where the anterior aspheric powered surface takes care of distance. Posterior diffractive steps take care of the intermediate. Elongated area of focus is created, which extends the depth. An Ecklet pattern is nothing but a step concentric ring pattern and a diffractive design, which is formulated to give a better intermediate vision. It takes care of mostly of distance and intermediate foci. Less glare and halos are seen due to this elongated focus that is formed, less light scatter, and less loss of contrast sensitivity compared to the refractive or diffractive multifocals. The Symphony is a good example of this. Here we see how the monofocal forms a single distinct focus, multifocals 2 distinct focuses, but the EDOF lenses form an elongated focus, which takes care of intermediate to distance visual areas. Coming to trifocals, this takes care of distance, intermediate, as well as near foci. The step height of the diffractive ring determines the focal length of the foci. Second order diffraction and asymmetric light distribution is the principle. It has better contrast sensitivity. My personal favorite is the AT Lisa Zeiss trifocal, and most of my patients are very happy with this. So I've practically used this more than the Restore, which is a diffractive multifocal. This is a Blumix injector. It comes preloaded with the lens. It's a plate haptic design. The latest one on the horizon is the Panoptix, available in India, of course. It's a tri-quadrifocal kind of a concept, where what happens is, in our routine trifocals, there is a distance and a near focus. The near focus takes care of the 40 centimeter reading part. Intermediate is placed at 80 centimeters. But since most intermediate vision activities are typically performed at a relaxed arm's length of 60 centimeters, the near up close in Panoptix is at 40 and the intermediate is given at 60, which is of a huge help compared to the other trifocals where it is at 80. Also, a fourth focal point at 120 centimeters provides seamless intermediate distance coverage, redistributes light extending from intermediate to distant foci, and this fourth focus boosts the distance vision and improves contrast sensitivity. Here we can see these are the routine IOLs, which have 80 and 40 plus distance. This is PanOptix with 60 and 40, and the quadrifocal nature of it has an extra 120 centimeter focus also, which decreases contrast, which improves contrast sensitivity and boosts the distance to intermediate areas as well. The newer IOL, the iHands, is an EDOF type of IOL with a distance and intermediate range of 40 centimeters and also one at 70 centimeters. Useful in low light settings. The continuous increase in power from the periphery to the center of the lens extends the depth of focus, which helps in intermediate vision. Focusing on the car navigation system while driving, night driving, reading a sign in a store, reading price tags while shopping, watching TV, including reading subtitles, reading a computer, playing cards, smartphone distances, playing piano and other instruments, and a little more confidence while going downstairs or walking on uneven surfaces. That's what the iHands, that's what Technis is promoting. But I haven't myself used the iHands lens since COVID times began. Indian newer IOLs. Also versions available to us are those of iDiff bifocal, TriDiff, trifocals, Rayner and Optima also making them, and an Indian EDOF such as Suprafoc. The results are good, but not always predictable. You can have a refractive surprise. So what are the disadvantages of multifocal IOLs? Loss of contrast sensitivity, dysphotopsias due to the pupil size, which is mesopic in our evening times or requirements, centration, tilt, edge effect, and transition zone effect. Again, what causes the problems with centration and pupil size? We'll just deal with two angles, the angle alpha and the angle kappa. Angle alpha is the angle between the visual axis and the pupillary axis. It's mostly used in corneal refractive procedures. The angle alpha is that between the visual axis, that is the green one here, and the optical axis, which cuts the eye and bisects in half at nodal point level. A high angle alpha more than 0.4 is considered a contraindication for implantation of multifocals, as decentration of these premium IOLs can cause poor visual outcomes. Here you see the innermost ring of the multifocal. The visual axis and optical axis should not cross out of this first ring, otherwise it will cause a lot of glare halos and poor contrast sensitivity. So what are photic phenomenon? They are the unwanted irritating images. Positive ones are the arc, glare, flash, and flare, as well as halos. And negative photopsias are temporal darkness. Why do we get the halo? From the reflections of light off of the transition zones of multifocals. The glare comes when an oncoming vehicle hits the center of the lens or the IOL that is put, plus also hits the edge of the lens and produces a reflection of light towards the macula, and that causes a glare, which is very annoying. This is how ghost images, halos, and glares look in simulation. Coming to the temporal black arch that one sees, men come back and are satisfied by this particular photic phenomena. Here it happens because the light coming from the temporal side hits the nasal retina. One of the ray does not intervene with any media and escapes the iris edge or pupillary edge and lens edge, but the other one hits the lens or the IOL edge and gets refracted. The cone between these two is the one where a crescent-shaped shadow is developed and is appreciated as a dark temporal temporal dark arch of photopsia. Seen with double truncated square-edged IOLs more, and also more in hydrophilic acrylic lenses. Rounded frosted anterior edges eliminate the mirror effect and reduce this. Silicone IOLs are more forgiving for this photic phenomena. And to correct a dissatisfied patient, a minimum 6 mm optic should be used. Rhexis overlap of the IOL edges is suggested. Rhexis should hence be 1 mm smaller than the optic. And piggyback IOLs to fill in this area, or reverse optic capture helps. This is the mirror effect caused by the square double-edged premium IOL. And a rounder one helps to take away the mirror effect. Astigmatism management. So during cataract surgery, one can, place the wound step in a different way, do PK or LRI, and implant a toric IOL. Toric IOLs can correct up to 4 diopters of corneal astigmatism. Every 3 degrees of misalignment of toric IOLs causes a 10-degree reduction in intended astigmatism correction. A rotation of 30 degrees can totally negate the whole purpose of you using it. So the indications are corneal astigmatism greater than 1 to 1.5 to 5 diopters. Toric IOLs are available as toric bifocals, trifocals, EDOF lenses as well. It all starts with proper biometry. At the APA, CRS and ASCS platforms, the band calculator, toric IOL calculator is available. Also, each specific lens would have their own calculators. This is also the smart toric, which only needs you to place the lens at 180/90. So toric marking is best done in sitting position to prevent cyclotossive markings, and slit lamp is the best to do it. The head has to be in perfect primary position. Dry the cornea, place the mark at the limbus, and make the slit of the slit lamp really thin at the corneal apex. I do also mark 180/90 and then go ahead and mark the slit. When the slit is marked this way, the degree of slit is the degree that you need to mark. Intraoperative marking and guidance while you place this lenses, and to confirm the markings that you've made, are done with Callisto and newer available machines like Callisto, where the IOL master takes the measurements, feeds them into the data management system, and that is then transmitted to the surgical microscope. This image overlay facilitates IOL placement and alignment. The ORA also does the same and gives intraoperative real-time calculations of the postoperative refraction as well. And also the alignment of the, check the alignment of the toric IOL that you put. So does the Varian with the image overlay. The best things to do while you're at it in the surgery is to achieve a capsular rhexis of 5 to 5.25 millimeters, a colder phaco, use of Viscoat and Helon, and intraoperative markings using Callisto or such devices. Removal of the visco behind the lens is of utmost importance, tight closure of wounds, and anti-inflammatory drugs later. A parallax can develop between the corneal markings and the trifocal, toric IOL markings. Hence, turn the eye from side to side and check and assess while you are in surgery, just before closing. Check before ending the surgery with ORA and align if it is misaligned. Premium IOLs. All of these are premium IOLs, of course, but it all begins with the workup. Visual acuity, anterior segment evaluation, intraocular pressure, keratometry, topography, immersion A scan, or optical devices. The iTrace, specular microscopy, OCT, B-scan if necessary. The extra tests required are you should examine each patient with an indirect ophthalmoscope. Specular microscopy should be done. OCT should be used to rule out macular pathology or retinal retinopathies. Mesopic pupil size by topographer, angle kappa and higher order aberrations should be checked up by the aberrometers. Detailed patient professional and expectational understanding is important, and counseling. Very much important before you even think of giving the patient a premium IOL or recommending it to them. Biometry, an ultrasound biometer or an optical biometer. The immersion is also something which should be gotten into practice, and also the optical biometers such as IOL and Lensta. Which IOL formulae to be used? Shorter eyes, Hoffer-Q, regular eyes, any of these, including Haig's Holiday, and Barrett, usually for toric IOLs, longer eyes, SRK/T, Holiday, and the newer formulas. The Olsen, the Barrett 2, and the Hill are the newer formulas, which are ray tracing, Vergence, and artificial intelligence, respectively. And these are all incorporated in the newer machines. A topographer is essential for K-reading confirmation to see the higher order aberrations and the myopic pupil size. Abrometry. What are higher order aberrations? The changes in the way the light moves and the strands of light which point on the macula, not exactly on the macula, cause a lot of aberrations and symptoms in the patients, such as double vision, blurriness, ghost images, halos, starbursts, loss of contrast, and poor night vision. The abrometers used before, the Hartmann-Shack principal type, the Schoening, differential skioscopy, and the ray tracing. The iTrace here combines both wavefront abrometry as well as placido-disc-based. Preoperatively, it is used to choose the positive, negative, aspheric, spherical aberration, the higher order aberrations before toric IOLs, and also it comes up with the modulation transfer function, root mean square, and point spread function, all indicators or tongue twister words used to indicate how much contrast sensitivity we can expect later. The approach. Again, patient selection, counseling, and more counseling, and understanding of his professional requirements and expectations. The contraindications here are, take or leave such a patient. The ideal patient should be the one who does not have ocular surface disease, dry eye, previous corneal refractive surgery, zonular weakness, subluxation, ARMD, glaucoma mostly, retinal pathology, advanced diabetic retinopathy, and amblyopia, of course. The bifocals usually are used in those who demand a good near vision, do not drive, and cannot afford a trifocal. I would use it or keep this only for those patients, or the patients who are not in active profession, who use computers meagerly and feel a lot. Because this gives an excellent distance and near vision, but not a good driving vision. To get a bifocal in the dominant eye to be of, 4 diopters will take care of the near focus, and the non-dominant eye of 3.25 diopters will take care of the distance focus. The EDOF patient selection, or the trifocal selection, are those patients who require better night vision, lesser night photic phenomena seen, and trifocals greater near vision, so the avid reader benefit, forgiving for decentration and pupil size. Again, a concept alert. So in practice, when we see a patient who is ideal for IOL, premium IOL implantation, we have to do the whole workup, rule out if there are any pathologies, not go for the patient or recommend him the IOL at all, and then come with tailor-made or patient-specific answers for each of the issues, starting from the affordability of the patient till the ones that you're comfortable putting with, and availability of the IOLs, and then practicing something like how we would take the approach of monovision. So in monovision, what one does is, in the dominant eye, monofocal is of emetropia is put for distance correction. And in the non-dominant eye, monofocal of myopia up till -2 diopters is implanted, for which helps in the near vision. In mini monovision, distance and near is again taken care of, but the difference between the two IOLs powers should not, be more than 0.75 diopters. In modified monovision, the dominant eye has a bifocal with the add of plus 2.75 for distance and in intermediate vision, and a non-dominant eye should have a bifocal of plus 4 diopters add for near vision. This takes care of distance, intermediate and near by only using bifocals. Like we said in the other patients who cannot afford trifocals. Then comes micromonovision, where the distance, intermediate and near vision again is taken care of, but here premium lenses are used, like the EDOF in the dominant eye with an emetropic post-op refraction for distance and intermediate, plus in the non-dominant eye, put an EDOF with an add of 1.75 diopters. This will help for near as well. Another way to use micromonovision is dominant eye with an EDOF for distance and intermediate, and non-dominant could have a trifocal or bifocal for near. The hybrid monovision again serves or services the patient's distance, intermediate and requirement. The dominant monofocal is put to emetropia for distance correction, and in the non-dominant eye, trifocal for near and intermediate. Cross monovision is for avid readers, where in the dominant eye, monofocals producing myopia for near, and in the non-dominant eye, monofocals for programmed to emetropia for distance upward. This is how we do the permutations and combinations to better serve our patients and give a better post-op refractive result. So the patient is not uncomfortable. Also, certain practical scenarios which we should address is offhand if a techie would be there and he has certain requirements that he needs to read the computer for long. EDOF might help such a patient. For a night driver, monofocal or monovision can definitely help. A person who loves to drive and is not by profession a driver though, then an EDOF or a quadrifocal. A golfer should see the position of his hands as well as the ball where it goes. So an EDOF again. Same for the sports person. A young housewife would benefit by using a trifocal if she's affording, as she can see whatever's kept in the kitchen at arm's length, as well as read for near the price tags and look for distance as well. Older housewives not affording, of course, a bifocal or a monofocal. Older person, avid reader, I would say a trifocal. Surgeons, again, EDOF or trifocals. Oldies with high emetropia, monofocals. Young non-cataractous high emetropes would benefit with implantable contact lens or, ICL or a PRELEX procedure. That brings us to the end of this presentation, and we're open to discuss.
Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, can you hear me, Pooja?
Yeah, ma'am.
Very extensively, you have covered all the IOLs which are in practice at present, as well as premium IOLs, as well as which are in pipeline. So you have comprehensively covered both of them. That's a nice thing. Now let us take up a few questions. Two theoretical questions which had come were one person asked that while writing in the exams, can we use the brand names? I think once you put a description right, then you can, for example, you can put the brand name. You can do that.
Yeah. Why not? Of the Indian available premium as well as Indian IOLs.
Yeah. And another one was one was asking that there are different publications have given different, they have different opinions about the angle of the eye. So which one to reliably follow? So I would suggest that follow all the PGs, you should follow the standard textbooks, either the American Academy or Albert Jacobi. If you quote something from those books, then nobody questions you.
Very true.
That you can
even while researching and making the PPT, I found the angle kappa, alpha, and the axis given in a very confusing manner in many books. But you, like you said, we should refer to the standard text like Albert Jacobi.
Yeah. Then another question was that what is the importance of angle alpha? Actually, somebody had put angle kappa, but here we are more bothered about angle alpha. We were talking about angle alpha. I think you had put in one of your slides also.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate something on angle alpha? What is the importance of angle alpha?
Right. So the angle alpha subtends to the nodal point of the eye. Here you can see that the blue line cuts the eye in half. That's the optical axis. The visual axis joins what you are trying to see with the fovea. And between these two is at the nodal point is the angle alpha. If these 2 points of interest that we have, which help us see clearly, if I might, if they, go out of this first string of the multifocal IOL, it is going to cause a lot of edge effect, halos, glare, transition zone problems, and poor contrast sensitivity. Hence, here at the IOL level, angle alpha is the one which helps us out. And the angle kappa is more the one which is actually found out or studied by abrometry. And that is used mostly for corneal refractive procedure. And, that's the clinical significance where to use it. But for our interest, this, and it should not be more than 0.4 in the degrees apart from each other, to give us a good effect when we put premium eye.
Pooja, how do you measure it?
I would ask, deflect it back to you.
I think as of now, as of now, only eye trace is a machine.
Even in PG days, we used to discuss this a lot.
So only eye trace is a machine, which kind of measures it. And some abrometers, some newer abrometers do have an option. Pardon?
Wish you can buy the eye trace for her.
And also IOL Master 700 gives it. IOL Master 500 also gives it, but you have to derive a formula based on the IO plus IX. There is a formula which the Zeiss engineers can help us. So these are 3 or 4 devices which can help us measure the angle alpha.
Yeah. So if there, somebody has asked that which investigation would you like to do, if you're given a choice, Pentacam versus eye trace. So I would say like if you're more like you're going in for multifocal, then eye trace is better. And if you're thinking of you're planning to put a toric IOL, then you need a Pentacam. You need to undergo a corneal topography by Pentacam. There you require corneal topography. Whereas for multifocal, eye trace would be better. Any other opinions, Swapnish, you have? If you given a choice, you have to do only one, either a Pentacam or eye trace. Then what would you do?
I don't have either Pentacam or eye trace. So
eye trace could be a short note in recent advances as well, right? For all the PG.
Eye trace is more used actually for post toric IOL for repositioning. In these patients who are complaining about glare and halos, also to pick up what is the tilt of the IOL and why is the complaint in spite of doing a perfect surgery in premium IOLs, in EDOFs as well as multifocal IOLs. So the retrospective analysis of what went wrong, I think as of now at least people are using more for that eye trace machine. That is what I gather. And Dr. Neeta madam is there online, so she can add something.
Yeah, Sumit, you can unmute madam, Neeta madam, if she would like.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I can answer that question for you, Pooja. First and foremost, you're doing a cataract surgery. So eye tracing is generally to know whether the patient dissatisfaction in a corneal refractive surgery is because of the corneal problem or the cataract problem. So once you have decided the patient requires a cataract surgery, I think Pentacam takes better this thing over an eye tracy. So Pentacam would be the preferred choice rather than eye tracy.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, we saw you in full gear. Somebody's taken off your video mode.
No, never mind. I just wanted to tell you I'm happy that you have gone from shades of grey to full total red, you know. You remember making all my presentations in grey and blue, pink. So now I'm happy to see you.
Ma'am, following your advice, use bright colors.
Anyway, I'm happy to see you.
So another question is like, in a one-eyed patient, if we have a one-eyed patient, then what kind of an IOL would we prefer?
Dr. Swapnesh, monofocal
or a multifocal?
Either a monofocal or a monofocal toric if the toricity is too high. I won't opt for anything else. That is my opinion in a one-eyed patient.
Depends on the needs of the patient. If it's a housewife, you can go in for a multifocal. But otherwise, somebody who has great demands on vision, I think it's always going to be a monofocal or a monofocal toric.
Yeah, that is there. Apart from the ocular workup, as you have already outlined, Pooja, we need to go into detail about the lifestyle and the other systemic history also of the patient before deciding these premium IOLs.
Yes, ma'am.
What is the requirement? If like as if a person is a housewife, doesn't drive,
Yes,
then we can definitely think of a multifocal even in this situation. Is not diabetic, will not require dilatations and further checkups. So we
Yes,
can go ahead. But otherwise, if there is some other contraindication to multifocals, definitely then we won't be taking up that.
What would y'all prefer in sports people who want to go for premium IOLs?
Prefer in what, Pooja?
In sports person who would prefer to put a premium IOL after cataract. EDOF, right. One of my patient who's a coach for basketball, I had put a Indian trifocal because he could not afford the others, and he's doing extremely well with both eyes Indian trifocal.
How are you going to do this kind of extensive workup in COVID era, Pooja?
Ma'am, first I would say I would be wearing a mask and those transparent surgical goggles or post-surgical which our patients used to wear. And then a visor.
Remain in contact with the patient for so long. Huh?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, Zeiss, those breath shields, I've just installed at HN now on the NDAG machine and slit lamp machine. Though many patients are coming, but we've just taken a precaution to begin with. So these breath shields, they just attach to the oculars from our side and separate us both, the patient and the doctor, in 2 compartments as of now. But it's for us to see how we go forward. What is your suggestion, Dr. Swapnesh?
Pooja, why are you deflecting all questions to me? I think what madam means...
No, I can see you only.
What madam means is what is the bare minimum workup that we should do.
That's right.
So what is the bare minimum workup in a premium IOL patient that you are going to do in this COVID times? So I think if obviously the patient is choosing a premium IOL, a good slit lamp examination, a good biometry, a OCT macula, and if you have a topographer, then you can do a quick topography. I think that's enough. And topography is plus minus.
Yeah, even I would go, these are the minimum requirements. Good examination, anterior, posterior, first clinical, then good biometry by an IOL master, OCT macula, and corneal topography. At least these are minimum to be for premium IOLs. And one more question, like if a patient already has monofocal in one eye and is not happy with that, so in the other eye, would you give a choice of a multifocal or a extended depth of focus in the other eye?
he's not happy with the monofocal. I mean, wants it is depending. Does the patient want to be spectacle free? If they do want to be spectacle free, then I would definitely put a bi or a trifocal in the other eye to make them see for near better with that, or an EDOF.
Swapnesh, have you tried that in some?
So, madam, if there are two aspects to this question, if the monofocal patient is 6/6 without any error for distance, and still he is unhappy, that means he has been not counseled well, that his near vision is not going to be covered. So in that case, other eye, I would prefer putting a EDOF without rings. So that is the Eyhance. So that gives him kind of a vision, explaining that his near vision is going to be N8 or N12 at best, and we are not going to hit N6, but at least it gives him a good range of vision. And if the post-operative refractive error or any other ocular pathology is a problem, then that would be addressed in a totally different way in a monofocal patient. So I am assuming that your question is monofocal, good surgery, and 6/6 without any refractive error. Then other eye, I would prefer a EDOF without rings, that is Eyhance. I would hesitate to put any lens, or at best trifocal, because that gives the least glare and halos.
I have put trifocal in a patient's other eye who was operated elsewhere and not counseled for the premium IOLs, and was with one eye only monofocal. And not just once, but many such patients have been pretty happy with their intermediate, the computer 60 centimeter vision as well as near vision, and the distance with the first eye monofocal.
Sometimes these people are more happier than your both eyes trifocals.
Yes, ma'am.
They have superb vision in one of the eyes with the monofocal.
But if we put a simple multifocal in the other eye and one eye monofocal, then probably the patient might not be that happy, because probably might see glares and halos with one eye.
No, EDOF is the choice.
Yeah, so if a patient, like the question was, if the patient is having monofocal in the one eye, then for the next eye, I'm not happy with that monofocal, maybe we can try monovision or EDOF or a trifocal. But I think conventional multifocals would not give that good result in those.
They will realize the difference, so they will be more unhappy.
One experience I'd like to share. One of my very good friends from junior college got in touch with me during a New Year time, just to he continuously kept calling. He's somewhere in the south and at a very renowned good institute. He went for because he has high myopia ever since he was a child. He had PSCs, and now he's in his early 30s and needed to get a cataract removed. He was not counseled or less counseled. I don't know what happened. There was no issue of affordability. This was the best institute available there, and the best surgeon, of course, which the surgeon he only met in the operating room. And the patient is my friend. He was complaining the very next day, when he being he's an expatriate techie, he could not see what's on the computer. All he could do was read for documents and look at distance vision, distance focus, because restore was put when he was actually okay for even a PanOptix. Both eye surgeries done within 2 day, within 2 days of each other, and he was extremely unhappy. On the 7th day of the first surgery, both eyes again after a day's gap were fitted with PanOptix, and he's extremely happy now for computer vision and documents that he needs to read.
So just to add to that, there is a question in the chat about clarification for quadrifocal. So Pooja, can you go back to that slide and explain? There is a one student who wants to know more about it.
So PanOptix, Alcon have come up with this concept where they say that they give another focus at 120 degrees over here. kindly just do not. Routine triangles 80 and 40 centimeters. Panoptics 60 and 40 centimeters for a distance, intermediate, comfort intermediate focus at 60, which is arm's length, that's computer distance, and a 40 centimeter read. And along with this, a fourth focus at 120 centimeters in the intermediate zone, they say is being provided, which then, seamlessly goes and converges onto the distance focus and gives a seamless vision in the distance between beyond 60 centimeters up till 120 as well. So they are trying to promote it as a quadrifocality. And I am yet to use Panoptics, a lot. So I have to see if this quadrifocality helps. But my colleague used Panoptics and he was extremely excited to tell me the results that the patients are very happy. So were they when I used, 80 Lisa Zeiss. Extremely happy patients.
So one question, Pooja, do you put multifocals in very high myopes?
No, ma'am. No. I try to convince them not to. But there are patients who are, okay to afford it, but then we have to counsel them a bit.
Affordability is to be kept aside, whether they are the right lenses for IR myopes.
The trifocals?
Any multifocal.
I would avoid.
Maybe EDOF because there are no rings could be one of the choices, but otherwise anything with rings should be avoided.
The Symphony EDOF has rings, only the iHands doesn't. And I have not much experience using iHands. In fact, none at all. I was using those lenses in January.
Usually people practice monovision, micro monovision, because most of the times they might require repeated retinal examination, might require some lasers later on. That's why these IOLs are avoided. Multifocals.
God forbid something goes wrong in the form of a myopic SRNVM or a retinal detachment, then the person is in a mess, no?
Yeah, rings cannot be there in the IOL at that point. So, Swapnish, do you also not put premium IOLs in, mild diabetic retinopathy cases, or you just, reserve them for completely clean non-diabetics? Like, what is your practical approach?
Age of the patient and age of diabetes is both important. If he's a younger patient and having diabetes, he has a long way to go. So probably even if the retina is okay right now, we have to think about future and probably not put a multifocal IOL in this case. But suppose a 70-year-old or a 75-year-old, just 1 or 2 years of diabetes, well controlled, good macular OCT, I would not hesitate to put a multifocal or a trifocal. So age of the patient as well as the age of the diabetes, and obviously the retinopathy is important. And just to clarify that the multifocals do not, newer or older, they do not form a hindrance in doing a retinal laser or doing a retinal surgery, because we have very good viewing systems and we have very good laser systems now. So that's the old thing, that we can definitely do a retinal laser or perform a retinal surgery equally well. Yes, there will be some glitch through the rings. So with some difficulty, but not much, as much as it is perceived.
And does iHands, you think, would help theoretically or practically to?
Yeah, so I have been using iHands a lot, and no glare, no halos for these patients, and they get good intermediate vision. Don't promise them near vision, but you can, as you said, with iHands you can do a micro monovision. And so first eye, dominant eye, aim for the emetropia, and then if that is hit, in the other eye you can have a 0.5, minus 0.5 or minus 0.75 target, and they're happy with that. But don't promise them with N6, though you may achieve in many cases.
And diabetic, moderate to severe, diabetic retinopathy and iHands, any issues with lasering them? Or?
When the question comes severe diabetic retinopathy, it really
say moderate, more mild to moderate.
You have to gauge the visual potential of the patient. If he is a patient who can improve up to 6/9 with all your retinal as well as cataract treatment, then it is worth counseling him for Eyhance or any kind of EDOF without rings, because then the patient expectation goes up once we try to put in a premium lens and try to promise the sky to the patient. So visual potential has to be assessed by looking at the retinal evaluation, the reports, his history. So all that in mind, whether he has comorbidity like hypertension, cholesterol, anemia, any dialysis, RFT level. So it's a whole decision taken together. What is his profession? Does he really need one? It's not as simple as a book rule.
A chronic uveitis patient comes to us for a premium IOL. Would you want to?
Chronic. So it depends whether he's anterior or posterior uveitis. If he has had an attack of only anterior uveitis, then probably just see his previous workup, and you can have a hydrophobic 3-piece IOL placed inside. Again, 3-piece why standby? Because you may have some zonular weakness, or at present or in future, depending upon recurrent attacks. But posterior uveitis, again, it behaves same like any retinopathy. Sumita madam, anything to add?
I think another question was like, what are the indications for accommodative IOLs? So I believe in accommodative IOLs, we actually, in practice, we have only the which are working at the extended depth of focus IOLs, which are there. And for them, like if, again, patients which are indicated, people who want more of intermediate, because here they won't be having a very good near vision. These extended depth of focus in which we put these EDOF lenses, they might require some, for fine print, they might require some glasses. So with that counseling, so again, we have to see the lifestyle of the patient and the requirement of the patient, and on that, the indication will depend. So that is another question. Like, apart from that, I think most of things have covered, and
sure.
Time is also
sure.
The time. Can we then wind up the session?
Sure, madam. You want to give any closing remarks? Neeta madam, you want to give any closing remarks?
Closing remarks, very good lecture. And
Thank you, ma'am.
I'm happy to see it was almost like a DY meet.
Seriously.
Good night, all of you.
So, thank you so much.
The take-home message, like I would tell to all the students, like one had asked, one question was like, if there is a short note or a full question, how should we write, So just for the writing part, if you want to, you can divide it as according to the material, then according to the optics and what is available and what is in pipeline. You can divide it that way and write your answer. And for practical tips, if you want to know what are these advanced IOLs, then they do require a good preoperative workup. Then what is present in the market are the conventional multifocals, the trifocals, the EDOF lenses. This is what is available in the market. Trifocals at present are, I think they are working the best. And in indicated patients, you require a toric. You can go ahead with the toric multifocal. The cutoff is around 1 to 1.25. And in pipeline, we do have all these lenses which we started with, the light adjusted lens, the perfect lens, the fluid vision lens. So there are many lenses which are coming in pipeline, which will really change the, the refractive part of cataract surgery. That will go leaps and bounds. So there are many more things in pipeline. So with this, we can wind up the session. Anything else Sumit wants to add?
No, nothing, ma'am. Thank you.
I want to add something, that throughout the lecture, there were no financial interests from the speaker or the moderator.
Yeah. They're only newer IOLs the
Thank you.
latest ones and the practically used ones that we wanted to talk.
Yeah. Sumit, thank you again for bringing all this together. Thank you for coordinating. Pooja,
Yeah,
thank you.
Sumit,
Thank you, Swapnesh. Thank you, Neeta ma'am. Thank you, Sumita madam.